are your Kansas City Chiefs co-beat writers for Kansas City Chiefs on SI. While I take care of the podcast, Zach is boots on the ground covering the Kansas City Chiefs within the facility. And you've got a big day coming up, Zach. You've got the Super Bowl rematch being held at Arrowhead Stadium. I know that the Chiefs Kingdom's excited. I think that the Chiefs are excited, while they also are probably have a little bit more determination going into this game, starting 0-1. How excited are you knowing that you get to watch a Super Bowl rematch at Arrowhead covering the Kansas City Chiefs?
Yeah, it should be awesome, Dom. As many of the players and coaches said this week, there's really no excuse for not being up and amped up for this game. I know that they're planning to have some V2 bombers flying over right at the end of the national anthem, so it should be pretty crazy place there at Arrowhead.
I think it's going to be really excited. I'm really excited to watch and just kind of be in communication with you throughout the whole game and covering all that for it. But today for the podcast, Zach and I, we're going to talk about 3 game day storylines that we want to cover. We kind of want to discuss going in, and some things that we look for improvement dating back to whether it be week 1 against the Los Angeles Chargers or even the Super Bowl against the Eagles. While this is the second week, I think that this is one of the biggest games that the Chiefs have on their entire schedule. If they lose to this team again, it could definitely spark the conversation of if the dynasty is over or not. But with that being said, that kind of leads into our first game day storyline that we have written down, is whether or not we think that if the Kansas City Chiefs were to lose once again to the Philadelphia Eagles, on if there would be time, if it would be time to concern, or to have concern rather. Um, I think that we've seen a lot of teams in the National Football League start off very poorly and still find their way into getting into the playoffs. For the Kansas City Chiefs, I think in their fan base, there could be an immense amount of concern just dating back to their recent history. This has been a team that has been dominating the AFC West, and if they start 0-2, while other teams are either 1-1 or 2-0, it could kind of have a unsettling feeling in their stomach, knowing it's like, oh, this is a little unfamiliar. But I still think that on paper, for how this roster is made up, the head coaching situation, quarterback room, I still think that once the Chiefs start to get rolling, I think that there's a way that they could probably rattle off multiple wins in a row, even if they do lose on Sunday. Zach, what are your thoughts? Do you think that it's a big concern if the Chiefs drop 0-2 to start the season?
Well, I will tell you that no one is thinking that at this point inside the locker room, coaching staff, everybody is squarely focused on the Eagles right now. But if that does happen, I will tell you that the Baltimore Ravens last year started 0-2 and they managed to come back. So a lot of it has to do with the culture and the personnel and the leadership. And the Chiefs are league leaders in all of those areas. So no, I wouldn't be concerned at all if they start 0-2, although it's something that's very unfamiliar for people around here. The Chiefs haven't been 0-2 since 2014, so it would take some getting used to, but I would not be, especially with the Giants right around the corner.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the after this week. I think that the Chiefs should have some more favorability in winning. I've seen a lot of saying that, going into Arrowhead, the Eagles are still favorited just because of the quick 1-0 record. But I do think that Kansas City, knowing that this is how big of a game it is, this is a team that stood in the way of them in history last season in the Super Bowl. There's been a whole lot of talk this offseason on whether or not this is the quote unquote revenge season. And if it didn't get started off in week 1, what better way to start it off in week 2 than against the team that is really the driving force for the revenge season in hopes that they can get their way back into the playoffs. Another question that, or a positional area to watch in the week 2 matchup to me is the offensive line. Now we know going into this offseason, or the offseason just out of, the Chiefs had their sight set on improving that offensive line, seeing how many times Patrick Mahomes got brought down, whether that be on limited protection on the left or the right side of the offensive line. There was not a whole lot of protection for him last year. In week 1, we kind of saw small glimpses of that from the select players, but I also want to know your thoughts on how you think the offensive line is going to fare against a team that has gotten to Patrick Mahomes a whole lot recently in the on the defensive side of the ball. What are your thoughts on how the Chiefs offensive line looks?
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of getting to him a lot in that Super Bowl, he was sacked 6 times. That was his single game career high. He'd never been sacked six times in a game, and Vic Fangio was able to do it without calling a single blitz. So he got plenty of pressure. But let's face it, this offensive line is completely different than what it was last year, especially on the left side. Josh Simmons had a great rookie debut last week against the Chargers. He had only 4 pressures and no sacks allowed. I think he had 49 pass block snaps. So uh, no, I'm really not concerned, especially because the Eagles lost a couple of those players that generated most of those 6 sacks in the Super Bowl. Milton Williams and Josh Sweat, they're both gone. So is Brandon Graham, who retired. I think the interesting part of how the offensive line is going to function in this game is going to be in establishing a run, which is something the Chiefs desperately need. You can't just drop back and have Patrick Mahomes trying to pull out his magic every game. That's not a winning recipe. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing how the Chiefs offensive line attacks Jalen Carter right there on the inside.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be a game to watch essentially for Patrick Mahomes. He was kind of the driving force for the offense last game. And I guess that makes sense because they had to play catch up the entirety of the game. He stood up as a leader, but there wasn't a whole lot of dominating presence on the offensive side of the football for Kansas City, primarily because Xavier Worthy got knocked down in the first 3 plays, I believe, of the week 1 matchup against the Chargers. But now, as we've seen, and have you seen because you've been in the facility, Xavier Worthy is still out there and practicing with his teammates. While he is likely to be questionable with the dislocated shoulder, how do you see that wide receiving room looking for a really big game? They've got to have those
Yeah.
explosive plays.
Yeah, I can tell you we were all shocked. Brad G, who's the vice president of communications, walked into the media room yesterday and he said it's a day on Thursday that Andy Reid uh, doesn't normally speak, and so he wasn't speaking on Thursday. And Brad walked in just to update everybody on the injuries before practice, and he said, "Hey, I've got an injury update. Jalen Royals will not practice, but everybody else will." And so I asked him right away. I said, "Xavier Worthy?" He said, "Yeah, Xavier Worthy's going to do something." And then all of a sudden, that was the biggest story of the day, and it's really shocking considering how violent that collision was with Travis Kelce. They did officially come out and list him as doubtful today. And Andy Reid doesn't play any games. And even if he uses him as a decoy, that would really help, in my opinion. But I don't think Andy Reid's going to play him unless he won't aggravate the injury, which would be even a worse situation, obviously. I don't think he's going to use him unless he can produce and he won't get any further injuries. But the other guy, Dom, to really watch is Tyquan Thornton. I had a chance to catch up with him today in the locker room, and Tyquan, an interesting thing about him, and I wrote about this for On SI, is Bill Belichick actually called Andy Reid last year, midway through the season, right after the Patriots, with the new regime. Belichick was gone. He spent that year out of football last year before he took over at North Carolina. But Belichick actually called Andy Reid and said, "Hey, this guy, you got to take a look at him. He's got a lot of great potential." Taekwondo was a second round draft pick of the Patriots in 2022. He had some pretty serious speed at the combine there. In fact, one scout clocked him at 4.21 in the 40, which, as everybody knows, was Xavier Worthy's record-breaking combine speed. And so the other thing to watch with Taekwondo is he's really developed that deep ball chemistry with Patrick Mahomes, and that's something that Patrick didn't have last year when Rashee Rice was gone, and, you know, injured for the full season, and Hollywood Brown was working his way back. Xavier Worthy was really the only target there, and so I think that Taekwondo could play a really big role in this game. Keep your eye on number two.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how Thorin can kind of step up. This is a big test for him if coming out from a great preseason. He had a chance and he had multiple chances in game one where he succeeded and some, he's still kind of picking up the ropes. But I think one player as well to watch, and it might be a cop out answer, especially going into a really big game, is veteran tight end Travis Kelsey, just primarily because of how he reacted to his doing in injuring Xavier Worthy. I think that that's only going to motivate him, seeing how his lack of performance against the Eagles in the Super Bowl was last year. That's only going to add to the fire. I think that Travis Kelsey is going to be a guy to watch on top of and along with Tyquan Thornton. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, those are our three game day storylines to watch. Be sure to tune in to watch the Chiefs take on the Eagles. It's going to be a big game. I think a lot of viewers who are not even Chiefs or Eagles fans are going to tune in just to know what the Super Bowl rematch marquee is titled to it. Zach, thank you so much for joining us. I'm very excited to see how everything is going to go for you on your first home game for Kansas City.
Yeah, always a pleasure, Don. Look forward to the next time.
Awesome. Well, with that, folks, be sure you follow me at Dom Minchella on X. You can also follow Zach at Zach S. Gilbert over on X. We post and repost every single day. We've got the coverage of the Kansas City Chiefs for you. If you also want to make sure that you don't miss any coverage, be sure you follow us over on X at KC Chiefs on SI. All stories, podcasts, and analysis are published exclusively free for you, the viewers. Thank you guys once again for stopping in. Always remember, be kind to one another, and I'll see you tomorrow.